The bank statement trembled in Keisha's hands as she stood frozen in her kitchen. The fluorescent light above flickering across rows of unauthorized withdrawals. $7,000. Gone from her twins' college fund over the past 6 months, drained in increments small enough to escape notice until now. The paper crinkled under her tightening grip as rage flooded through her veins like liquid fire. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I would love to know what city you are joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me immerse you in this story. Keisha's legs carried her to the kitchen table where she collapsed into the chair, spreading out both statements, her son's and her daughter's accounts, side by side. The pattern emerged with sickening clarity. Every withdrawal matched precisely with dates when Darlene, her mother-in-law, had volunteered to take the kids to their dental appointments, their piano lessons, their soccer practices. The woman had possession of the backup debit cards Keisha had given her years ago for emergencies. Her phone buzzed against the granite countertop. A text from her husband flashed across the screen, saying he'd be home late from the construction site. Keisha's jaw clenched as she thought about how many overtime hours Marcus worked while his mother siphoned money from their children's future. Her fingers flew across the phone screen, pulling up her banking app. She navigated to the transaction history, screenshotting every fraudulent withdrawal, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. The front door slammed. Keisha's 15-year-old twins burst into the house, their backpacks hitting the floor with simultaneous thuds. Devin kicked off his sneakers, while his sister Jasmine headed straight for the refrigerator, both oblivious to the storm brewing at the kitchen table. Keisha quickly flipped the statements face down, smoothing her expression into something resembling calm. The kids didn't need to know yet, not until she confronted Darlene directly. "Mom, can Grandma pick us up tomorrow for the mall?" Jasmine called out, her head buried in the fridge's glow. The words struck Keisha like a physical blow. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile floor with a harsh screech that made both twins turn to look at her. Her hands gripped the table's edge until her knuckles paled. "No. Your grandmother won't be taking you anywhere for a while." Jasmine emerged from behind the refrigerator door, holding a juice box, her eyebrows knitted together in confusion. Devin paused mid-stride toward the stairs, his soccer ball tucked under one arm. The siblings exchanged glances, sensing the tension radiating from their mother like heat waves off summer asphalt. Keisha forced herself to breathe, to unclench her fists. She gathered the bank statements, folding them with precise, controlled movements, and sliding them into her purse. Her mind raced through scenarios, calculating approaches, weighing consequences. She needed proof beyond the statements, security footage from the ATMs, perhaps, or records showing Darlene's own account deposits matching the withdrawal amounts. Story continues. The bank's parking lot was nearly empty at 9:30 the following morning. Keisha had called in sick to work, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she'd clutched her phone. She sat in her sedan now, watching the entrance through her windshield, the engine ticking as it cooled. The bank statements lay spread across her passenger seat like evidence at a crime scene. 3 months of systematic theft, circled in red ink where the numbers screamed their accusation. She pushed through the heavy glass doors into the sterile cool of the lobby. The chemical scent of cleaning products mingled with the coffee brewing behind the teller stations. A young woman in a navy blazer approached, her smile practiced and hollow. "I need to speak with someone about fraudulent activity on my children's accounts," Keisha said, her voice low but firm. The smile faltered. The woman, her nameplate read Taylor, nodded and gestured toward a row of offices along the back wall. Keisha followed, her heels clicking against polished tile, each step feeling like a march towards something irreversible. Her purse strap dug into her shoulder, weighted down by the manila folder containing every piece of documentation she'd gathered the previous night. Account histories, withdrawal dates, the original authorization forms from when the accounts were opened. The branch manager's office smelled of leather and stale cologne. He introduced himself as Vincent Carlyle, his handshake firm, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to concern as Keisha laid out the evidence across his desk. She couldn't sit. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed, watching him scan the highlighted transactions. "These withdrawals, you're saying they weren't authorized by you?" Vincent asked, his finger tracing a column of numbers. "My mother-in-law has access as a secondary guardian, for emergencies." Keisha's jaw tightened. "Apparently, she's had a lot of emergencies." Vincent pulled up the accounts on his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen's blue glow reflected in his reading glasses as he scrolled through transaction histories. Keisha watched his expression harden, the slight purse of his lips that told her he'd found something. "The withdrawals were made at 3 different ATM locations," he said, rotating the monitor so she could see. "All within a 5-mile radius of—" He paused, checking an address on file. The secondary guardian's listed residence. Keisha's breath caught. She leaned forward, bracing herself against the desk's edge, staring at the timestamps and locations. Every Tuesday afternoon. Like clockwork. While she was at work and the kids were at school, Darlene had been systematically draining accounts meant for college funds, for futures that Keisha and her late husband had started building before the cancer took him 3 years ago. The grief hit fresh, sharp as broken glass. She straightened, pressing her palm against her sternum where the pain radiated outward. "I need copies of everything, security footage if you have it, and I want her removed from these accounts immediately." Vincent nodded, already reaching for his phone. While he spoke in hushed tones to someone in security, Keisha turned toward the window overlooking the parking lot. Her reflection stared back at her, ghost-like in the glass. A woman who'd trusted too much, who'd let her husband's mother into their lives because the kids had already lost their father, and she couldn't bear to take their grandmother away too. Her phone buzzed, a text from Darlene. "The kids said they can't come over. What's going on?" Keisha's thumb hovered over the keyboard. 20 different responses formed and dissolved in her mind. Instead, she powered the phone off and slipped it into her purse. Whatever came next would happen face to face, not through the cowardice of text messages. The manila folder felt substantial in Keisha's hands as she pushed through the bank's glass doors. 47 pages of betrayal, stamped and notarized. The afternoon sun hit her face, harsh and unforgiving, as she crossed the parking lot toward her Honda. Her heels clicked against the asphalt, each step deliberate, measured, while her mind raced 3 moves ahead. She slid into the driver's seat and sat motionless, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles went pale. Through the windshield, she watched ordinary people living ordinary days. A young mother wrestling a toddler into a car seat. An elderly man checking his lottery tickets. A teenager on a skateboard weaving between parked cars. None of them knew that her world had just tilted sideways. The folder lay open on the passenger seat. She forced herself to look again at the withdrawal slip from March 15th. Darlene's signature, bold and unapologetic, authorizing the removal of $800 from her son Marcus's account. Her dead husband's name, Derek, stared up at her from the account title. Derek Richardson Memorial Education Fund. They'd opened it together the week after Marcus was born, adding $25 every payday without fail. Keisha's hand trembled as she turned the page. Another withdrawal. June 3rd, $1,200 from Ava's account this time. Then, July, August, September. The pattern stretched back 18 months, maybe longer. Vincent had promised to pull records from the previous 2 years as well. She slammed the folder shut and started the engine. Her house was 15 minutes away, but she took the long route through downtown, needing time to think, to breathe, to prevent herself from driving straight to Darlene's pristine colonial and doing something she'd regret. Traffic lights turned red, then green, then red again. She barely noticed. Her fingers drummed against the steering wheel in an arrhythmic pattern that matched her pulse. The elementary school appeared on her right. 3:30. Too early for pickup, but she pulled into the lot anyway and parked beneath an oak tree whose branches scraped against the roof. Through the chain-link fence, she could see the playground equipment standing empty, the swings swaying slightly in the breeze. Marcus had fallen from those monkey bars in 2nd grade, split his chin open, needed 6 stitches. Darlene had been there that day, had held him in the emergency room while Keisha filled out paperwork, had stayed up with him that night when the pain medication wore off. That memory made everything worse. Keisha pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, eyes closed, breathing through her nose. The woman who had comforted her grandson, who had brought casseroles after Derek's funeral, who had promised to help with anything at all, that same woman had been stealing from those children. Not borrowing, not temporarily using. The accounts showed no deposits, no repayments, just a steady hemorrhaging of funds that were supposed to carry Marcus and Ava through college, through life. A knock on the window jolted her upright. A security guard stood outside, one hand raised, his expression concerned. She lowered the window halfway. "Ma'am, school doesn't let out for another 40 minutes. Everything okay?" "Just early for pickup." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'll wait here if that's all right." He studied her face for a moment, seemed to weigh whether to press further, then nodded and walked back toward the main building. Keisha raised the window and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Mascara intact, lipstick still perfect, no visible signs of the rage churning beneath her skin. Her phone powered back on with a series of rapid-fire vibrations. 6 more texts from Darlene, each more insistent than the last. The final one read, "I'm coming over. We need to talk." Keisha's jaw clenched. She typed out a response with controlled precision. "Don't. I'll come to you. 7 o'clock tonight." The reply came within seconds. "What's this about?" Keisha didn't answer. She set the phone face down on the console and opened the folder again, forcing herself to catalog every theft. Her index finger traced down the columns of numbers, adding them mentally. Rough estimate, $23,000. Gone. The number sat like lead in her stomach. The school bell's shrill ring cut through the stillness. Keisha snapped the folder shut and shoved it under her seat, her movements mechanical. Through the windshield, she watched the double doors burst open, releasing a flood of teenagers in navy and khaki uniforms. They scattered across the circular drive like dropped marbles, some breaking into runs, others clustering in tight groups that blocked the walkways. She spotted Marcus first, tall like his father, basketball under one arm, his backpack dangling from the opposite shoulder. He was laughing at something a kid with bleached tip hair was saying. The sound didn't reach her through the glass, but she could see his whole face light up, teeth showing, head thrown back. 17 years old and still capable of that kind of unguarded joy. $23,000. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel until the leather creaked. Marcus hadn't noticed her car yet. He was still talking, gesturing with his free hand, completely unaware that his grandmother had been systematically robbing him. That the basketball camps he'd attended last summer, the ones Derek's mother had insisted on paying for as gifts, had actually been funded with his own stolen money. Movement to the left caught her attention. Ava emerged from the middle school entrance, her natural hair pulled into 2 puffs, her uniform skirt hitting just above her knees despite Keisha's morning reminder to roll down the waistband. 13 and already testing every boundary. She had earbuds in, her head bobbing slightly as she walked, oblivious to everything except whatever music was pumping through her phone. Different accounts, different theft amounts, same betrayal. Keisha honked twice, the sound sharp enough to make several students turn. Marcus spotted the car and waved, said something to his friend, then jogged across the parking lot. Ava hadn't heard, was still walking in the opposite direction toward the bus loop. Keisha honked again, longer this time, and watched her daughter's shoulders stiffen in recognition before she slowly turned around. They converged on the car from different angles. Marcus reached the passenger door first, yanking it open and tossing his basketball into the back seat. "Mom, you're never here for pickup. What's—" "Get in, both of you." The edge in her voice made him pause halfway into his seat. Ava appeared at the rear door, pulling out one earbud with exaggerated slowness. "I was going to ride the bus with—" "Now." Ava's eyes narrowed, but she climbed in without another word. The door slammed harder than necessary. Keisha put the car in drive before their seatbelts clicked, pulling out of the lot fast enough that the tires squealed slightly on the hot asphalt. In the rearview mirror, she caught Ava and Marcus exchanging a look, that silent sibling communication that needed no words. The drive home took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of Marcus attempting casual conversation about tryouts, about some drama with the JV coach, his voice filling the silence with increasing desperation. Keisha made non-committal sounds in response, her attention fixed on the road, on keeping her hands steady, on not revealing the tremor that wanted to work its way up from her chest. Ava stayed silent, staring out her window, one earbud back in place. Keisha turned onto their street too fast, felt the back end of the sedan fishtail slightly before straightening. The house loomed ahead, a 2-story colonial with black shutters that Derek's mother had helped them secure the down payment for 15 years ago. Another gift, they'd thought. Another manipulation point, she realized now. She pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Neither kid moved. "Inside. Kitchen table. Don't go upstairs." "Mom, what's going on?" Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the question. Keisha ignored him, grabbed the folder from under her seat, and stepped out into the afternoon heat. It hit her like a wall, the temperature still hovering near 90 even at 3:30. Sweat immediately prickled along her hairline as she strode toward the front door, her heels clicking against the concrete walkway. Behind her, the car doors opened and closed with measured care. She could feel their confusion, their worry radiating at her back. Good. Let them be worried. Let them understand that something fundamental had shifted. The house was cool inside, the air conditioning set low the way Derek liked it. Keisha dropped her purse on the console table by the entrance and moved straight through the living room into the kitchen. The space was spotless. She'd spent 2 hours cleaning yesterday, scrubbing grout she couldn't even see dirt on, organizing cabinets that were already organized. Anything to avoid sitting still, to avoid the thoughts that had been circling since she'd opened that folder at her desk Tuesday morning. She placed the manila folder in the center of the kitchen table and stood behind one of the chairs, both hands gripping its back. Marcus and Ava filed in slowly, their backpacks still on, clearly uncertain whether this was a sitting situation or a standing one. Sit. They sat. Keisha opened the folder and pulled out the first bank statement, Marcus's account. She slid it across the table toward him, her finger landing on a highlighted withdrawal from March. $600. Then another statement, another highlighted line. $800 in January. She said nothing, just kept sliding papers until 5 months of theft sat in front of her son. His face changed as he read. Confusion melted into concentration, then hardened into something darker. I don't understand. These withdrawals, I didn't make these. I know. She turned to Ava next, pulled out a different stack. The amounts were smaller. Ava's account had less to begin with, but the pattern was identical. Monthly withdrawals, sometimes twice a month, stretching back 8 months. Ava picked up the top statement, her young face creasing as she tried to process the numbers. Who took my money? Keisha watched her daughter's fingers tremble against the paper, watched the confusion shift into something rawer. The kitchen light cast harsh shadows across the table, turning the bank statements into accusatory documents that seemed to pulse with their own damning rhythm. She walked to the counter and picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over the contact labeled Barbara, Derek's mother, the woman who had watched these children since they were in diapers, who had a spare key, who knew every password because Keisha had trusted her with everything. The phone rang 4 times before the familiar voice answered, sugar-sweet and oblivious. Keisha, honey, I wasn't expecting. We need to talk. Now. Keisha ended the call and set the phone down with enough force that it skidded across the granite. Marcus stood from his chair, his 17-year-old frame suddenly filling more space than it had moments before. He grabbed one of the statements, crushing it slightly in his fist. It was Grandma? The word came out like a betrayal in itself. Keisha nodded once, sharp and definitive. She watched her son's jaw clench, watched the muscle there jump and twitch as he processed what this meant. All those weekends Barbara had taken him to shop for school supplies, all those times she'd insisted on treating Ava to mall trips, the money had already been theirs. Ava made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. She pushed her chair back and stood, wrapping her arms around herself in that way she did when middle school got too overwhelming. Keisha moved toward her, but Ava backed away, shaking her head. Did Dad know? The question hung in the air like smoke. Keisha felt it coat her throat, making it hard to breathe. She thought of Derek coming home late every night this week, his phone conversations that went silent when she entered rooms, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes over breakfast. I don't know yet. The doorbell chimed through the house. Barbara hadn't bothered waiting for an invitation. Of course she hadn't. Keisha heard the front door open, heard the jangle of keys that shouldn't work anymore but did because Derek kept promising to change the locks and never followed through. Keisha, the door was unlocked. I brought those cookies Ava likes. The cheerfulness in that voice made Keisha's molars grind together. She moved through the kitchen doorway into the hall, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. Barbara stood in the foyer, designer purse dangling from one arm, bakery box balanced in the other hand. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than the money she'd stolen last month. Their eyes met. Barbara's smile flickered, dimmed, then reformed itself into something more cautious. What's wrong, honey? Keisha said nothing. She walked forward, took the bakery box from Barbara's hands, and set it on the console table beside an arrangement of fresh flowers that Barbara had brought last week. Another gift purchased with money that should have been sacred, untouchable. Marcus, Ava, come here. The kids appeared in the hallway, and Keisha watched Barbara's face carefully. The older woman's eyes darted from child to child, her smile growing brittle. She clutched her purse strap with both hands now, knuckles whitening against the leather. "Well, look at you two. I haven't seen you since—" "Show her the statements." Marcus moved forward first, his teenage anger barely contained behind clenched teeth. He thrust the crumpled paper toward his grandmother. Barbara took a half step back, her shoulder blades hitting the closed front door. She didn't reach for the document. "I don't understand what—" "8 months." Keisha's voice came out flat, emotionless. She moved closer, invading the space Barbara usually commanded with her presence and her money and her constant suffocating involvement in their lives. 8 months of withdrawals from their college funds? Barbara's hand flew to her throat, fingers fluttering against her pearl necklace. The gesture was automatic, theatrical, the same move she made at church when someone mentioned hardship or struggle. But her eyes gave her away. They sharpened, calculating, scanning for exits that didn't exist. "There must be some mistake. I would never—" Ava thrust her own statements forward, her young voice cracking. "March 15th, $400. April 2nd, $500. May 20th, Marcus added, $750. They stood there, grandmother and grandchildren, separated by sheets of paper that documented a betrayal none of them would ever forget. Keisha watched Barbara's face cycle through expressions, denial, indignation, fear, before settling on something that looked almost like defiance. Barbara straightened her spine, lifted her chin. Her fingers stopped fidgeting with the necklace and dropped to smooth down her jacket instead. "I have every right to that money. Every right." The words hung in the foyer like a slap waiting to land. Keisha's vision tunneled, the expensive wallpaper and antique mirror blurring into meaningless shapes. Her fingers curled into fists so tight, her nails bit crescents into her palms. The sharp sting kept her grounded, kept her from lunging forward and wrapping her hands around that wrinkled neck with its ridiculous pearls. Barbara's mouth kept moving, words spilling out in a torrent of justification. Something about co-signing the accounts years ago when the children were born. Something about her name being on the paperwork. Something about family and investment and her contributions to their upbringing. The sound became white noise, a buzzing that competed with the blood rushing through Keisha's ears. "Mom?" Ava's voice trembled. She pressed closer to her mother's side, the bank statements crinkling against her chest. "What does she mean?" Keisha's hand shot out, palm forward, silencing her daughter without looking at her. Her eyes never left Barbara's face. She stepped forward again, close enough to smell the expensive perfume that always preceded her mother-in-law's arrival, close enough to see the powder settled into the fine lines around her mouth. "Show me the documents." Barbara's shoulders twitched. She clutched her designer handbag tighter against her ribs, the leather creaking. Her gaze darted past Keisha toward the staircase, then toward the kitchen, mapping routes through the house she'd furnished with her own selections when they'd first moved in. Control. She'd always needed control. "They're at home, in my safe. I can bring them by next. Now." Keisha pulled her phone from her back pocket, the screen lighting up her face in the dim foyer. "We're going to your house. Right now." The drive took 12 minutes. Keisha's knuckles went white on the steering wheel as she followed Barbara's silver Mercedes through the tree-lined streets of the gated community. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, silent, his jaw working as he stared at his grandmother's license plate ahead. Ava hunched in the back, her fingers flying across her phone screen, probably texting her father, probably trying to reach someone who might explain how this happened. Barbara's house rose up from the manicured lawn like a monument to excess. 3 stories of brick and columns, more rooms than one widow could ever need. Keisha pulled into the circular driveway and killed the engine before Barbara had even opened her car door. The gravel crunched under Keisha's shoes as she crossed the distance in long strides. Inside, the air conditioning hit like a wall of ice. Barbara's heels clicked across the marble entryway, echoing in the 2-story entrance hall. She moved toward the sitting room, the one with the uncomfortable antique furniture where she forced them to sit during holiday visits. But Keisha grabbed her arm. The older woman gasped, her papery skin cool under Keisha's grip. The safe. Now! Barbara's home office smelled of old books and furniture polish. Heavy curtains blocked most of the afternoon light, leaving the room dim and cave-like. She crossed to an oil painting of her late husband, Derek's father, a man Keisha had never met, and swung it outward on hidden hinges. The safe behind it was small, black, modern against the traditional decor. Her fingers shook as she entered the code. The electronic beep seemed too loud in the silent room. Ava and Marcus crowded behind Keisha, their breathing audible, their presence a wall of support at her back. The safe door swung open. Barbara reached inside, her movement slow, deliberate. She pulled out a manila folder, held it against her chest for a moment like it might protect her. Then she extended it toward Keisha without meeting her eyes. The folder felt thin in Keisha's hands. Too thin. She flipped it open, her eyes scanning the first document. Account opening forms from 17 years ago, when Ava was born. Her own signature at the bottom, young and optimistic. Derek's signature beside it. And there, in the co-owner line, Barbara Richardson. The second document was identical, dated 15 years back for Marcus. Same arrangement, same signatures. You said it was for emergencies. Keisha's voice came out hoarse. She remembered that day now, remembered Barbara's speech about protecting the children's future, about making sure someone responsible could access the money if something happened to their parents. You said it was just a safety measure. Barbara moved to the window, pulled back the curtain with one finger. Light streamed across her face, highlighting every wrinkle, every age spot her makeup didn't quite cover. The money was just sitting there, not growing, not being used properly. I made investments, better returns. $23,000. Marcus's voice cracked on the number. He stepped forward, the statement still clutched in his hand. That's how much you took. Combined. From both accounts. The number hit Keisha in the stomach like a physical blow. Her knees went soft. She grabbed the edge of Barbara's mahogany desk, feeling the cool wood grain under her palm, focusing on the texture to keep herself upright. 23,000. Ava's freshman year. Marcus's last 2 years of high school. The money they'd scraped together. 500 here, 1,000 there. Birthday checks and Christmas bonuses, and every tax return for 16 years. Barbara let the curtain fall. She turned back to face them, and something in her expression had shifted. The fear was gone, replaced by something harder, more calculating. Where's the money now? Keisha forced the words through numb lips. Invested. In properties. In accounts Derek doesn't know about. Barbara smoothed her hands down her skirt. I was protecting it. From both of you. The statement landed in the space between them like a grenade. Keisha's vision tunneled, the edges of the room going dark and fuzzy. She felt her fingers dig into the mahogany desk, nails scraping against the polish hard enough to leave marks. Her breath came in short, shallow pulls that didn't seem to bring enough oxygen. Derek moved first. He crossed the distance to his mother in 3 long strides, his shoulder brushing past Keisha with enough force to make her stumble. His hand shot out, gripping Barbara's upper arm through the silk blouse. What properties? His voice had dropped to something low and dangerous that Keisha had never heard before. "What accounts?" Barbara tried to pull away, but Derek's grip tightened. Keisha watched his knuckles go white, watched the fabric of Barbara's sleeve bunch and wrinkle under his fingers. A small sound escaped the older woman's throat, not quite a gasp, not quite a whimper. "You're hurting me." Derek released her so suddenly, she stumbled backward into the window frame. The curtain rod rattled. Outside, a car alarm started wailing, the sound piercing through the glass. Keisha pushed off from the desk. Her legs felt disconnected from her body, moving on their own as she walked to where Barbara had steadied herself. Up close, she could see the red marks Derek's fingers had left on the woman's arm, already starting to darken. She felt nothing looking at them. No guilt, no sympathy. Just a cold, spreading numbness that started in her chest and radiated outward. "My children's money." Each word came out carefully separated, distinct. "You took my children's money, and you put it where? In your name? In accounts we can't touch?" Barbara's hand went to her throat, fingers pressing against the pearl choker. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared on her upper lip, cutting through the powder. "Real estate appreciates. The market was—" "Answer her question." Derek's voice cut through whatever justification Barbara had been building. He'd moved to the desk, was pulling open drawers with sharp, violent jerks. Papers scattered. A pen holder tipped over, spilling its contents across the floor with a clatter. "Where's the documentation? Bank statements? Property deeds?" "I don't keep them here." Barbara's eyes tracked Derek's movements, her body still pressed against the window. "They're in a safety deposit box, at a different bank." The car alarm outside went silent. In the sudden quiet, Keisha could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, a thick, heavy rhythm that made her head throb. She thought of the spreadsheet at home, the one she'd maintained for 16 years. Every deposit noted, dated, categorized. Birthday money from Keisha's mother before she died. The $5,000 from Derek's signing bonus at his first real job. The $2,000 they'd scraped together the year the basement flooded, and they'd eaten rice and beans for 3 months straight. "Which bank?" Keisha heard her voice coming from somewhere far away, mechanical and flat. Barbara's chin lifted, that familiar stubborn set to her jaw returning. "I'm not obligated to—" Keisha moved without thinking. Her hand shot out, closing around the collar of Barbara's blouse, bunching the silk in her fist. She pulled the older woman forward, away from the window, close enough that she could smell the Chanel perfume and the coffee on her breath. Barbara's eyes went wide, showing white all around the irises. "You put my baby's college money in your name." Keisha's voice stayed low, controlled, even as her hand trembled with the effort of not pulling harder. "Money we saved by not taking vacations, by driving cars until they died, by saying no to ourselves so we could say yes to their futures." Barbara's fingers clawed at Keisha's wrist, nails scraping skin. Keisha felt the sharp sting, but didn't let go. Behind her, Derek had stopped searching. She could feel him watching, could sense the decision he was making about whether to intervene. "The bank name, now." "Continental." The word came out strangled. "Continental Savings, the branch on Riverside." Keisha held on for 3 more seconds, watching Barbara's face flush deeper red, watching the fear come flooding back. Then she opened her hand. Barbara stumbled backward, hitting the window frame again. The curtain rod gave a warning creak. Derek was already at the door, yanking it open so hard it bounced off the wall. "We're going, all of us, to that bank, right now." Barbara's hand went to her throat, massaging the skin above the pearls. When she spoke, her voice came out rough and damaged. "It's Sunday. The bank is closed." Keisha felt something crack inside her chest, a physical sensation like ice breaking. She turned away from Barbara, walked to where Derek stood in the doorway. Her husband's face had gone gray, his mouth set in a thin, bloodless line. She could see the pulse jumping in his temple, could see the way his hands kept clenching and releasing at his sides. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Marcus appeared, his phone clutched in one hand. His eyes were red-rimmed, wet. "I called Ava, told her what's happening." "Marcus, you shouldn't have—" Derek started, but Marcus cut him off. "She had a right to know. Someone stole her college fund." His voice broke on the last word. "Grandma stole our money." Barbara made a sound from behind them, but Keisha didn't turn around. She moved past Derek into the hallway, her shoulder brushing Marcus's as she headed for the stairs. Behind her, she heard Derek's voice, low and intense. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You're meeting us at that bank with the key to that safety deposit box, or I'm calling the police and my lawyer. Your choice." Keisha's hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel, following Derek's sedan through the morning traffic. In her rear-view mirror, Marcus sat rigid in the back seat, staring at his phone screen with hollow eyes. The dawn light cut harsh angles across his face, making him look older than 17, making him look like someone who'd learned too early that family could wound deeper than strangers. The bank parking lot was nearly empty at 8:45. Derek pulled into a space near the entrance, killed the engine, and sat motionless behind the wheel. Keisha parked beside him, watching as his door opened, and he unfolded himself from the driver's seat with mechanical precision. His suit was wrinkled. He'd slept in it, if he'd slept at all. She'd heard him pacing the guest room until 3 a.m., the floorboards creaking in rhythm with her own racing thoughts. Barbara's silver Mercedes wasn't there yet. Keisha climbed out, feeling the weight of exhaustion in every muscle. Her feet hit the pavement with a dull slap, and she realized she was still wearing yesterday's clothes, the same jeans and blouse she'd had on when the world had tilted sideways. The fabric smelled like sweat and rage and something bitter she couldn't name. Derek moved toward the bank entrance without looking at her. He pressed his palm against the glass door, testing it, then stepped back and crossed his arms. His jaw worked constantly, grinding, the muscles flexing beneath his skin like something alive and separate from the rest of him. Marcus joined them, shoving his phone into his jacket pocket. The kid had dressed in a button-down and slacks, like he was going to a funeral. Maybe he was. The funeral of whatever trust he'd had left in the adults around him. At 8:53, Barbara's Mercedes turned into the lot. Keisha felt her stomach clench, acid rising in her throat. She swallowed it down, tasting copper and bile. Barbara parked 3 spaces away, as if distance could protect her from what was coming. The engine cut off. Seconds ticked past. The door finally opened. Barbara emerged wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, her face carefully composed behind the dark lenses. She'd changed into a navy pantsuit, her hair freshly styled, pearls at her throat. The performance of normalcy. The pretense that this was just another Monday morning errand. She walked toward them, her heels clicking against the pavement with measured steps. No hurry. No sign of the woman who'd stumbled backward against a window frame, voice cracking under the weight of accusations. This Barbara stood straight-backed and controlled, her purse clutched against her side like a shield. "The bank opens at 9, she said, her voice flat. Derek said nothing. Keisha watched a vein pulse in his temple. watched his hands ball into fists so tight the knuckles went bone-white. A security guard appeared inside the glass doors, unlocking them from within. The metallic click echoed across the parking lot. Derek moved first, pulling the door open and holding it, his eyes locked on his mother's face. Barbara walked past him without meeting his gaze, her chin lifted in defiance or denial, or some combination of both. The bank lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and recycled air. Their footsteps echoed against marble floors as they crossed to the service counter. A young teller looked up from her computer, her professional smile faltering as she registered the tension radiating from the four of them like heat waves off summer asphalt. "We need to access a safety deposit box," Derek said. His voice came out rough, abraded. Barbara reached into her purse with slow, deliberate movements. She pulled out a small brass key, held it between her thumb and forefinger, like something contaminated, set it on the counter with a soft clink. The teller glanced between them, her training warring with instinct. "I'll need to verify authorization and—" "It's my box," Barbara interrupted. "Number 417. The teller nodded, typed something into her computer. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, filling the silence with rapid clicks. Keisha's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a small explosion. She could feel Marcus beside her, vibrating with barely contained fury. Could see Derek's reflection in the polished counter. A man carved from stone and waiting. "This way, please," the teller said finally, gesturing toward a corridor lined with brushed steel. They followed her through a heavy door that required a code. The vault room beyond was small and cold, walls covered in numbered boxes from floor to ceiling. The teller located 417, used her master key in conjunction with Barbara's key, and pulled the long metal drawer free from its slot. She set it on a small table in the center of the room. "I'll give you privacy," she murmured, backing toward the door. The click of the latch closing behind her sounded final. Barbara stood motionless, staring at the box. Derek moved first, flipping the lid open with a sharp metallic scrape. Inside lay stacks of bound cash, neat bundles wrapped in bank paper. Keisha stepped closer, her vision tunneling. $20 bills, 50s, hundreds, all bearing the sterile perfection of bank withdrawals, lined up like evidence in a crime scene photograph. Derek's hand moved to the first stack. He lifted it, his fingers trembling, and read the withdrawal slip paperclipped to the front. His face drained of color. $4,500. His voice came out strangled. "From Marcus's account, last October." He dropped that stack and grabbed another. And another. Each one labeled with dates, amounts, account numbers that Keisha recognized like her own reflection. College funds systematically dismantled and converted to cash, hidden away in this metal coffin 6 inches wide. Marcus made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a cry. He lurched forward, his hands scrabbling through the stacks, pulling out bundle after bundle, throwing them onto the table where they landed with soft thuds that seemed too quiet for the destruction they represented. "There has to be... How much?" His voice fractured. Derek was already counting with mechanical precision, his lips moving silently. Keisha watched his face, watched the numbers accumulate behind his eyes, watched him age 5 years in 5 minutes. 68,000, he finally said, give or take. The number hung in the cold air like smoke. Keisha reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of one stack, feeling the texture of the paper bills. Real, tangible. Not numbers on a screen anymore, but physical proof of betrayal. Bound and categorized and hidden away like contraband. She turned to face Barbara. The older woman had removed her sunglasses and her eyes were dry, hard as river stones. No tears, no remorse, just a cold calculation that made Keisha's breath catch. "You can't do this," Barbara said finally. Derek laughed, a sharp, broken sound that echoed off the steel walls. "Do what? Take back money you stole from our children?" "I was protecting it. From you." Keisha reached across the narrow table and placed her palm flat against Derek's chest, feeling the rapid hammer of his heart through the cotton of his shirt. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth still open, the argument dying unspoken. She applied gentle pressure, and he stepped back, his shoulder blades hitting the cold metal wall of the safety deposit room. Barbara's posture shifted, spine straightening, chin lifting in that familiar gesture of aristocratic defiance that Keisha had witnessed at countless family dinners. The fluorescent light overhead cast harsh shadows under the older woman's eyes, making her look skeletal, ancient. Keisha gathered the stacks of bills with methodical care, her fingers moving with surgical precision as she aligned each bundle, creating neat rows on the metal table. The paper rustled softly, almost whispered. She didn't look at Barbara, didn't acknowledge the woman's presence at all. Instead, she pulled her phone from her jacket pocket and opened the camera application. The click of the shutter echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. She photographed everything. The withdrawal slips with Barbara's signature looping across the bottom. The account numbers that matched the statement she'd printed and brought in her purse. The dates that corresponded perfectly with the mysterious transfers she'd questioned months ago. Only to be told by Barbara that she must be confused, stressed, not remembering correctly. Barbara lunged forward, her hand reaching for the phone. Keisha pivoted, smooth as water, putting her body between the device and the grasping fingers. Derek moved to intercept, but Keisha shook her head once, sharp and definitive. "Don't," Keisha said. The single word carried more weight than any speech. Barbara's hand fell to her side, and something in her face crumpled. Not surrender exactly, but recognition. A chess player seeing the board, understanding that checkmate was inevitable, no matter how many moves remained. Keisha continued photographing. The safe deposit box number, the bank's interior signage visible through the doorway. The cash itself spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Each image uploaded automatically to her cloud storage, time-stamped and geotagged, creating a digital trail that couldn't be erased or denied. When she finished, she began counting the money herself, not trusting Derek's earlier tally, needing to feel each bill between her fingers, needing the physical act of accounting to ground her in reality. Her lips moved silently as she worked, creating stacks of $5,000 each. Barbara watched, motionless, barely breathing. $68,420. Keisha pulled the empty duffel bag from her purse. She'd brought it on instinct, some part of her knowing how this would end. The bag was black canvas, innocuous, the kind sold at any sporting goods store. She packed the money inside with the same careful attention she'd given to photographing it, zipping it closed with a sound like tearing fabric. She shouldered the bag, feeling its weight settle against her hip. Then she turned and walked past Barbara without a word, her sneakers squeaking softly on the polished floor. Derek followed. She heard his footsteps, felt him moving in her wake like a satellite caught in gravitational pull. "Wait!" Barbara called after them. Keisha didn't slow. She navigated through the vault's narrow corridor, past the rows of identical metal drawers, each one holding someone else's secrets. The bank manager stood near the entrance, clipboard pressed against his chest like armor. His eyes widened at the sight of the bulging duffel bag. "We're finished here," Keisha said to him. Outside, the afternoon sun hit her face with startling intensity. She'd forgotten it was still daylight, forgotten the world continued its rotation while they'd been underground in that metal tomb. The parking lot stretched before them, asphalt shimmering with heat mirages. Derek's keys jangled as he pulled them from his pocket. His hands were shaking, fine tremors that made the metal chatter. "I'll drive," Keisha said. She held out her palm, and after a moment's hesitation, he dropped the keys into it. They walked to his truck in silence, their shadows stretching long and dark across the pavement. Keisha unlocked the doors, placed the duffel bag in the back seat, and climbed behind the wheel. The leather was hot enough to burn through her jeans. She adjusted the mirrors with precise movements, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking space. In the rear-view mirror, she caught a glimpse of Barbara emerging from the bank's entrance, standing on the concrete steps like a monument to old grievances. Keisha drove. Block 1010. 6 months later, Keisha stood in the doorway of the bedroom that had once belonged to her eldest. The walls glowed fresh buttercream yellow, a color chosen from 18 different paint samples spread across the kitchen table one Saturday morning. She'd done the work herself, rolling the paint in smooth, vertical strokes while Derek held the ladder steady. The old posters were gone, replaced by framed photographs, graduation pictures, family moments frozen in silver frames. The bank statements arrived in neat stacks now, forwarded directly to her email every Friday at 9 a.m. She checked them religiously, scanning each line item with the precision of an accountant. The balances grew steadily, modest deposits accumulating like snowfall. No mysterious withdrawals, no unexplained transfers, just the clean mathematics of savings undisturbed. Keisha moved through the house, her footsteps echoing on hardwood floors she'd refinished in February. The kitchen smelled of coffee and cinnamon. She'd started baking again, something she hadn't done since before the discovery. A pie cooled on the counter, lattice crust golden and perfect. Through the window, she watched Derek working in the backyard, installing raised garden beds they'd ordered online. His shoulders moved with purpose as he drove screws into cedar planks. The doorbell chimed. Keisha wiped her hands on her apron and crossed to the entryway. Through the frosted glass, she recognized the silhouette immediately, her oldest daughter, home from college for spring break. She pulled open the door, and they embraced on the threshold, sunshine spilling across their intertwined shadows. "Mom, it smells amazing in here." They moved to the kitchen together. Keisha poured 2 mugs of coffee while her daughter dropped her backpack by the breakfast bar. The conversation flowed easily. Classes, roommates, plans for summer internships. No mention of grandmother. No reference to that dark February day in the bank vault. Some wounds healed better when left unexamined. Derek came in from the backyard, dirt streaked across his forearms, smile genuine and unforced. He hugged his daughter, then stood beside Keisha at the counter, their shoulders touching. The kitchen filled with the ordinary sounds of family. Laughter, the clink of mugs, the hum of the refrigerator. Later, after dinner, Keisha sat at her laptop in the home office. The financial management software displayed neat columns of numbers, color-coded and organized. She'd taken 3 online courses in household budgeting, earned certificates she'd never frame, but kept filed in a folder labeled Progress. The kids' accounts showed healthy balances, each one password protected with phrases only she and Derek knew. A text message illuminated her phone screen. Her attorney, confirming the restraining order renewal had been processed. Keisha archived the message without responding, then opened her photo gallery. Pictures of the family vacation they'd taken last month, a cabin in the mountains, everyone bundled in winter coats, cheeks red from cold air and genuine happiness. She closed the laptop and walked to the living room where Derek sat reading, glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as she entered, marked his page, and set the book aside. They didn't need words. She curled against him on the couch, his arms settling around her shoulders with familiar weight. The house settled into evening quiet. Outside, streetlights flickered on one by one, casting amber pools across the neighborhood. Inside, Keisha felt the steady rhythm of Derek's breathing, the warmth of home earned back through 6 months of conscious reconstruction. Tomorrow, she'd check the accounts again. She'd bake another pie. She'd continue building this new architecture of trust, one small action stacked upon another, foundation solid and secure. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.